and welcome to the second session in our Year of Faith series. My name is Diane Hanley and I am your host. As we mentioned in the previous session, our diocese has created this series in response to Pope Benedict's call to devote this year to deepening our faith. We have entitled this program, Living a Faith-Filled Life. In our first session, we addressed the question that many of us ask, especially in times of struggle, namely, where is God in my life? With insights from Mr. Rob Tasman, we came to realize that God invites us into a relationship with God's self, and that God is constantly revealing God's self through nature, through people, and through our life experience. Our task is to be open to God's revelation. Through our recognition of God and God's love for us, we are granted the grace and desire to respond to God by loving God in return. Yet even when we begin to recognize God's presence in our midst, we may not always be sure what God is calling us to do with our lives. With so many unexpected twists and turns that our life seems to take, it is easy to wonder where God is leading us and what our life's purpose might be. In this second session, we take our exploration of faith a bit deeper by attempting to discover whether or not God has a plan for our lives, and if so, how we might discover that plan. To help open our minds and hearts to this theme, we're going to ask you to gather into small groups at the direction of your parish facilitator and voluntarily discuss your responses to this statement. Share a story of a time when you might have wondered if God had a plan for your life. Please pause the video to share your responses with one another in your small groups. As you probably realized from your group discussion, much of our life seems unpredictable and uncertain, causing us to wonder whether God actually has a plan for our lives. To assure us that we are not alone in trying to discern God's plan for us, we have asked a small faith-sharing group from St. John Vianney Parish in Baton Rouge to share some of their responses to the same question you addressed.
I think when you were pregnant with Daniel and you walked in and said you'd been working, you're 8 months pregnant, working 8-9 hours a day, stress level was through the charts, and you came in and said, I don't want to work anymore, I want to quit. And somebody told you, yeah, that'd be great, no problem. And I don't think that came out of my lips, but somebody had a better plan for us and allowed that to happen. And I think that's really when you realize, regardless financial, because it always falls back to financial needs, that kind of, that was never a consideration. We said, you know what, we can make this happen. And that's really what I'm sure in my eyes, that was a godsend, that she was able to quit work, stay home with, raise her first child, and 3 years later had another one, which was a blessing too. So I think that's
it
really,
was because all those years I worked and worked and worked for the almighty dollar. I didn't work to praise the Lord. I worked for me in the game that you play in the work field. And then all of a sudden I stopped, and I didn't want to work for that anymore. I wanted to work at being the right parent,
being a mother
and wife and mother. And it just hit me one day when I realized, oh, that choice was God-driven, but because of being God-driven and doing it, the blessings, He just bestowed and bestowed with healthy children, with financial
a friend of hers, not too long after that, came through and said, hey, I need some help, so she's doing some contract stuff. So it was a godsend, because things fell into place that we never looked forward. We weren't forward thinking enough to think that this is going to plan out. But it worked out beautifully.
And it was a leap on our part.
Sure.
But it was also, there's a basis there to begin with that let us know because of faith, we had a net. You know, faith in the Lord's guidance as well as our ability.
Right.
Well, I was 28 when I got married, and we weren't able to have kids.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, because what I wanted to do was, I always knew I wanted to be a mom.
Yeah.
And just, it never happened and never happened. And then my husband was diagnosed with a terminal disease, and he died after we had been married 16 years. He was sick for 5 years. And at that point, okay, I understand now why I couldn't have kids, because the thought of raising a teenage child alone just scared me to death. But I'm still kind of like, you know, my plan was to have a family, have children, be a stay-at-home mom, and obviously that wasn't the Lord's plan. So I'm 55 years old, still waiting for him to reveal to me what his plan for me is.
I don't think I ever ask why. I don't know. Most people do, and you know, I lost a child. I should be the first one to say, "Why, Lord? You know, what have I done?" I mean, I hear all those stories, but to accept that with His grace and strength is what I thought I needed to do, which is exactly what I did. So, you know, going through, and that's a real tragedy for a parent. And I did accept it. I had to. That's something you can't change. But did He have a plan for that? Yes, He did. And did some good things become of that? I would have to say yes. You know, I would not have said, let me suggest you take my child so I can become a better person.
Yeah.
Or I could be more sympathetic to another or anyone like that. But, you know, He has a plan, and that's why I know He has a plan, because definitely they're not our plans.
There's an old proverb that says, life gives you the test first, and then it gives you the lesson. So you get the adversity, and you say, why did this happen, you know?
Right.
And then you learn from it.
You learn from it. In 1992, I went through a divorce with small children, and I couldn't believe this was from God. You know, I couldn't believe this was happening. And what we did get through, I did live through it, and I had 2 children that grew up, and the children are both very stable, and they're very well adjusted, and they're working, and they're pretty well adjusted. So we learned some lessons from that.
Has the Lord just given us the Bible and our instructions on how we're supposed to live, and we're just here on our own? Or does He really, you know, is there predestination? Does He have a plan for us? And I guess when things don't go my way, when I couldn't get pregnant, when Terry died, I'm just like, is the Lord in control? Or are things just happening? And I guess I do sometimes wonder, does He have a plan for us?
Our Catholic faith reassures us that our God is a personal God who has a plan for humankind and a purpose for each one of us within that divine plan. However, we might still be unsure as to how we discern God's plan for our individual lives. We are very fortunate to be able to hear from Father Matt Lynn, a Jesuit priest from St. Paul, Minnesota, who will offer his insights on discerning God's plan. Since 1970, Father Lynn has taught courses and given retreats in over 50 countries. He has co-authored 21 books together with his brother and sister-in-law. One of his recent books is entitled Healing the Purpose of Your Life, which explores how one might discern God's plan and one's purpose in life. He is a regular retreat leader at the St. Joseph Spirituality Center in Baton Rouge, and on a recent visit, he graciously agreed to share his thoughts with us on God's plan.
Welcome. During this series, we're taking different questions. The one we're going to take right now is, does God have a plan for me? And if God has a plan for me, am I doing God's plan or am I getting God to do my plan? And how do I ever discover that plan? Those are questions that have been asked for centuries. Even back in 1833, there was a man called John Henry Newman, who later became a cardinal in the church. He looked at all the suffering that was around him, and he was really wondering, is there a God in charge, or is it just chaos? And as he's trying to answer that question, he just discovered suffering too. He was on this trip to Sicily, and he got very sick. He probably had malaria. He was dying. In fact, he told his butler, he was a very wealthy man then, told his butler to make out his will and also who to talk to after his death and tell him that he had died. And as he was passing out, he started to have this whole vision where he saw a light that was just so loving. I think it was a near-death experience. And that light looked at his whole life and sent him back with a mission. And he knew then that every single person is going to have this experience with this God who just loves like that light did. There's going to be a time when you see your life and a time when you know whether or not you have fulfilled what you have been sent to do. So he wrote this little prayer, which is in our book, Healing the Purpose of Life. I quote from that. God has created me to do him some definite service. He's committed some work to me which he's not committed to any other person. I have my mission. I may never know it in this life, but I will be told it in the next. Therefore, I will trust him. Whatever, wherever I am, I can never be thrown away. If I am in sickness, my sickness will serve him. If I am in perplexity, my perplexity will serve him. If I am in sorrow, my sorrow will serve him. O my God, I place myself in your hands. John Henry Newman, in that prayer, believed that everybody has a special mission. And he came back to help people know that. His whole mission was to help people know that God is in their heart, and you can hear this God directing you into whatever your special mission is. Risen Jesus, when he's empowering his apostles to go out that door where they were locked with all that fear, he tells them, you have this mission. As the Father has sent me, so I send you. And then he breathes on them the Holy Spirit. And they go right out that door, preaching, being put in jails. Nothing can stop them because they've received this mission and they received the Spirit to fulfill that mission. That's what the Holy Spirit is for. That wherever we are called to be this unique face of Jesus, the Spirit will empower us to do that. And Jesus needs each one of us. He needs grandmothers to be with grandchildren. He needs mothers to be with their children. Fathers, grandparents. He needs each of us because each of us has unique relationships that nobody else can have in the same way. We're all called to find a special way of giving and receiving love and life that makes a difference. When Jesus boiled down what we're to do, he didn't talk about 10 commandments. He only talked about 2. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. And then love your neighbor. And then love yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. There's to be that whole loop where we find our special way of giving love to God, to others, and of caring for ourselves. When we're in that, we're in our call. That's what God's will is. Always for us to give and receive love. And always for us to give and receive life. Even in the Hebrew Testament, there's that Deuteronomy 30, verse 19. I put before you death and life. Choose life. And Jesus said the same thing, John 10:10. I've come that you may have life and have it more abundantly. That's God's plan, that we become people who have the fullness of life and are able to share that whole gift of giving and receiving love and life, of making that difference in the world. So how do you do it? How do you know what your call is? If you know an artist, you know somebody who's found their call. because at least every artist I know is starving. They're writing poetry that nobody wants, painting, hardly anybody looks at it, and yet they have to keep going, doing that, because they just have to do it. That's their call. That's their way of giving and receiving love and life. And the great artists are the ones who have discovered that in a great way. For example, Beethoven. Beethoven came into a world where there is nobody giving him love. His father was an alcoholic. His mother had TB. The first son couldn't speak or hear. Second one dies. Third one, blind. Fourth one has TB. There is nobody there for him. So what's he do? He finds that whenever he does rhythms, he gets this love and life inside him. So he's making rhythms all the time on the floor. And then gradually he finds an instrument and starts making chords, and he starts writing his music. But when he's 26, he can't hear anymore. But he still has to keep following that gift. So how does he do that? Cuts the legs off his piano, puts the piano down on the floor, takes off his, it's a wooden floor, takes off his shoes, and then he plays a chord. And he, by feel, feels, what's this chord feel like? And then he does the next one. And what does it need so that it's harmonious, so that these chords come together in him? And that's the way he composed a lot of his great masterpieces. And one of them that he composed was the Ode to Joy. He just had to do it. So one way of finding what is your special gift, what do you just have to do? Because it's so enjoyable. It gives you, it's that loop of life. It gives others life, and it gives you life. It might be something as simple as gardening, baking. Maybe you're this person that just likes to be with children. But each of us has a special way. There's something in us that we just have to do. And as we do that, we start to find what that next step is. If it's a way of giving and receiving love and life, it's going to lead to another step of giving and receiving this love and life. We all come into the world with a unique voice, fingerprint, DNA. The FBI finds one of my hairs, they're going to find me. And we all come into the world with this unique mission to give and receive love and life. And this whole drive is within us. That's why we just have to do it. You don't have to know the whole plan. All you have to know is the first step, and then take the second one. And it leads to the third and to the rest of the plan. As long as you're into the loop of love and life and following it, you're on that road. The plan will unfold, person by person. When we're really doing what's in our loop of giving and receiving love and life, we become alive. We don't burn out when we're doing too much. We burn out when we're doing what we really don't want to do, what we're not called to do, what's draining life out of us, rather than what's in our loop of giving and receiving more love, more life. So, what's your passion? And how does your passion and the world's need meet? Mother Teresa helped one person, but there's a whole world out there that needed it too. And gradually it became this whole ministry, and sisters all over the world. So, follow your passion. And as you follow it, keep asking that question. Where does what my passion is meet what the world needs? And you're going to find your loop. There's another one. Wherever we've been hurt and healed, we have a special gift. As we use that, we continue to give and receive love and life. One that kind of shows that for me is Bill W., the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. At 10, he lost his father. His father just abandoned the family when he was drunk. 12, he lost his mother. He had this whole hole in his soul that he just kept filling through drink. That place where he needed to really connect deeply with a person who was like a father for him and be that kind of father. So he keeps drinking, and he has this experience where there's a great light when he's in a mental hospital. He's reached the end, He just calls out and says, you know, God, if there's a God, help me. And he has this experience of this great light coming, all this love, where he meets God. It's almost like the near-death experience again. And he has a sense of where he's called. He's called to begin to help another person. He's got all this love in him to share. So he does. He finds one other person. He has to go to Akron, Ohio. Finds him, Dr. Bob. And they find that if they are sharing with each other, they don't have to drink again. They're in their loop. Dr. Bob was a doctor. He found that if he practiced medicine and he helped alcoholics during that time, he never had to drink again. He helped 5,000 people as he got into his loop. And Bill W. founded AA everywhere because he had this energy that could go on year after year. Nothing would stop him because this was his special way, giving and receiving love and life. Where have you been hurt and healed? You have a special gift for helping others who are going through the same thing. Where it's the loop, where we've been hurt and healed, we have a special gift of compassion. And as we use that, we give life, and that whole loop of receiving it happens. We become a person who's more fully alive than ever before. And I would want to have this little way of finding this loop each day in my life. And there's a simple way of doing it. 2 questions. What am I grateful for? I'd ask that each night. Because whatever I'm grateful for, that was where that day gave me some life. That was where I was into that loop of giving and receiving love and life. And the rule is you just do more of that. Ignatius called that consolation, but all consolation means it's where you're into God's plan for giving and receiving more love and more life. And the second question is to find out where you get out of the loop. What am I not so grateful for? Wherever I'm not grateful, that was where I was stepping aside from this special way that I could have received more love and more life. What do I need to change there? Maybe I just did too much and I got tired and I got to put more sleep into my day, or more exercise, or beginning to eat better so that I have more energy. But those 2 questions help me find the loop each day. Where am I in it? Where am I out of it? And how can I get again centered into it? But you know, my favorite question is this one. What would you do if you had a year left to live? Because when time is short, I really have to see what's the essence that I want to keep doing. What are the things I could put aside? What would I want to add to my life? And then if this were the last year of my life, my fear would be that I'd be more about dying rather than about living. I can keep seeing the glass that's half empty rather than half full. So I would need some way of really celebrating life each day. So that's the question. What would you do if you had a year left to live? What would you add? What would you drop? What would you continue? And when you find that, you don't have to wait for that year to come. You'll know right now, so that you're going to live fully, rather than just wait for that final year when you're going to get your sight again on your loop and what you can do to give and receive love and life.
Father Matt will now lead us in a guided imagery exercise to help us explore the question he posed about what we would do if we only had a year left to live. Please sit comfortably with your feet on the ground and your hands in your lap as you follow Father Matt's direction during this guided imagery exercise.
Maybe just close your eyes and see yourself in your doctor's office and see the chairs around you and the examining table. Look at what's on the wall. Are there diplomas or are there charts? What's it feel like in there? Is it hot or cold? What's it smell like? Can you smell that antiseptic smell? What do you hear? Are there phones ringing? Is there music coming in? Do you hear a child crying? Do you hear telephones? What do you hear? And just take the next 3 minutes in silence to just see As you hear the doctor's verdict, you have a year left to live. What do you really want to do with that year? What do you want to continue? What do you want to drop? What do you want to add? That last year you can be about fully living rather than just about dying.
Once again, we invite you to share what you experienced and what you came to learn through this exercise. We again ask you to form small groups at the direction of your parish facilitator to share your reflections on the question Father Matt posed, namely, what would you do if you only had a year left to live? What would you add, drop? What would you continue? Please pause the video to share your responses with one another in your small groups. As we did with the previous discussion, we will hear the responses from the small faith group from St. Jean Vianney in Baton Rouge. Some of their responses may be similar to the ones you shared, and some may add new insights.
If I were told I had 1 year to live, I think I would set any sorrows that I have aside for myself, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to, because I'm not afraid to go there, a little afraid of how that's going to happen. But I think I would just grab to all of those that I love, friends, family, and just live the best that I can live in that year. And that's what I think I'll do. So how about you, Rudy?
The first thing I thought was, okay, where do I want to travel?
I never crossed my mind.
But then after reflecting on the question, obviously that's a greedy way of looking at it. And then I thought about my children. I have a son that's 25 that's in the military. I have a grandbaby on the way that's going to be here at Christmas. Daniel is 15. Grace is 12. And Anne, of course, I want to spend every moment with them.
Yeah.
What do they want to do with me? It's not important what I do. It's important on what they want to do with me if there's only a year left. So I would do anything that they would want to do with me.
I've kind of been in that situation because my husband
Absolutely.
My husband had a terminal illness.
Yeah.
We knew he was sick for 5 years. The last time, of course, they couldn't give us the exact date, so we didn't know when that year was. But we knew at a point we were told he would only live about 2 more years, and then things kept progressing. And traveling is not important. We found that out.
Mm-mm.
We always said we were going to go to Hawaii. I was going to go to Europe. Never happened. And when we found out he was sick, that never was on the table. It is the daily little things, your family meals together, planting flowers, and then him being able to walk out into the yard and look at the flowers, enjoying a nice day. Now, we did take a couple trips. We'd had a habit for our anniversary. That was our anniversary present, is we always took a little trip. And even that last year, I managed to, with him in a wheelchair, we found a bed and breakfast in Natchez that was absolutely wonderful and helped me with him because I needed a lot of help then. And I guess a lesson to take away from that too is how wonderful people basically are to start out with, and just people's heart goes out to you and helps you. They see you going down the street pushing a wheelchair, and help just comes out of the woodwork. And just spending more time with people, with family.
I would want to spend time with children, and maybe children that are challenged, that may have short time to live, or just a child, any attitude, because their freshness in their zest for life is so strong, and their no doubt that they're going to be around forever, But if a child, how the McDonald House does, Ronald McDonald, or that trip that they give them and so forth, I would love to get on a helicopter and go to the top of the mountain filled with snow, and this being this child's wish.
Dreams come true, yeah.
Yeah, the Dream Come True Foundation, whatever. Wouldn't that be cool to go do this with, and it could be a family member, or I think just getting to know someone totally new in a child version. I think that would be the coolest thing. That's a giving that I could have. Maybe my ego is wanting to leave a mark or something, but still, what a great thing to be able to give when your time is short.
At the beginning, you asked the plan, and I'm going like, well, I'll go here, and maybe that's not it, so I'm just following lead. But I think he explained it in the DVD that it's like a revolving circle. You give love, you take love, and you find it. You actually find his plan for yourself in the process of giving and receiving. And I have a problem receiving love from people because I want to give love more, and which is something I'm really trying to work on. Like, no, I'll do that, and let me do it. No, I'll do it, and to give. But I don't have a problem of trying to receive as much love as I can from God and from Jesus. I find that by myself. And so I'm saying, well, why don't you have a problem letting Jim do something for you?
Because
or
you know how good it feels doing it.
Maybe
Jim
so.
Feel good
but
about
I do think it's given me an idea of what maybe I can find it through more accepting of love and more giving of myself, and where I'm best at and happiest. Maybe that is the plan.
We started this second session in our year of faith by asking a basic question: does God have a plan for my life? From Scripture, we learn that God indeed has a plan for us, because in Jeremiah we read, "For I know well the plans I have in mind for you, says the Lord, plans for your welfare, not for woe, plans for a future full of hope." The plan that God has for each of us is part of a greater plan that God has for all of creation, and God gives each of us a role in carrying out that greater plan. The Catechism of the Catholic Church confirms this insight when it says, "God is the sovereign master of God's plan, but to carry it out, God also makes use of God's creatures' cooperation. Though often unconscious collaborators with God's will, human beings can also enter deliberately into the divine plan by their actions, their prayers, and their sufferings. They then become God's fellow workers and co-workers for God's kingdom." Like Jesus, when we carry out God's plan for our lives, we glorify God. In the Gospel of John, we hear Jesus say, "I glorified you on earth by accomplishing the work that you gave me to do." As you discern God's plan for your life, how God has gifted you, and how you might use those gifts in furthering God's plan, you can deepen your trust in the God who is guiding you in this year of faith.